so excited to have Shannon Talbot on the podcast today. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so you are a former corporate executive turned coach, keynote speaker, and now an author. And one of the things that we're really going to talk about is your new book, right? Break Free. Stop holding back, start being you, your guide to creating the career and life of your dreams. That is audacious, right? In that so many people don't even believe that's possible or they're worthy of that. So I think that this is such a great topic to talk about today.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to dive in with you.
Yeah, let's start with who is this book for? Who did you think about when you were writing this book?
So I thought this book is for a lot of moms who are
Yeah.
trying to balance their careers, their businesses, life, their kids, all of that, wearing all
Yeah.
those hats. It's really for moms who are looking to bring more joy and passion
Hmm.
into their lives. Perhaps they're looking for more balance to
Hmm.
bring that in. And also for anyone who perhaps feels a bit stuck in a rut. Things are maybe okay, but they want
Hmm.
more. Or maybe things aren't okay and they definitely want more in their lives.
Yeah.
So this book is for them. And then lastly, I would say this book is for anyone too who's maybe been playing a bit small and is then ready to go after more of what they want
Hmm.
to be bigger and go for more audacious or bigger goals. And this book will help them as well.
Yeah. And I definitely think, especially the exercises that you have in the book, I think are great. And I use similar ones to really get to the heart of what's holding you back. And so I also thought as I was reading the book, I would love to hear in your words what we need to be breaking free from.
Yeah. So in the book, I identified four key areas that we need to break free from. And I'll start by saying this too. We don't want to try and break free from all of them at once because we're setting ourselves up for failure. But I'm going to just share the four key areas, but just be mindful that I don't want everyone going, oh my gosh, oh no, I'm so behind in everything, or I have to do it
Right.
all. But the four key areas are number one, excuses. And this was my crutch for so long. And I share a lot of personal stories here at the book of myself and other really incredible women. But my excuse for years was I don't have time. I don't have energy. We say I don't have money a lot too to get out of things.
Mhm.
So we or I don't know how is another excuse we lean on. So those excuses are really just excuses, right? They're stories we tell ourselves to not do the thing that may be a bit scarier. We don't want to do it, which leads into the second one. And this is a big one and probably the more talked about one are fears.
Mhm.
So we have all these fears. And the one I talk about in the book that we probably maybe don't talk about enough, and especially for any mompreneurs, is a fear of success. So we might have, and I actually had this that I didn't, it took a coach teasing this out of me for me to realize I had this because it was so funny. She asked all these questions. And then in the end, it was this aha moment that, oh my gosh, if I get the client, if I make the sale, then I have to actually do the work. Then I have to show them I know what I'm talking about, or I have to do it. And oh, geez, then I might be judged, or I might not do it the way they thought, and all these things. So fear of success is a big one. Then third area are negative beliefs, or what I like to call fake news. So we tell ourselves stories, or they were things we learned in childhood. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. All these things that we tell ourselves. I'm not good with money, or I don't know how to get new clients. And these things stick and they really can hold us back. And the worst part too, but this one is a lot of times these things are subconscious. We don't actually know they're there. They're blind spots, but they're impacting us more than we realize. So I have some exercises in that chapter to help tease out some of those negative beliefs or fake news, fake stories we tell ourselves. And the last one it goes hand in hand with all the rest, but it's our bad habits. And that's especially if we have a down day or something falls through, it's turning to those unhealthy coping mechanisms that we might do. For me, it was eating chips. I would eat a lot of chips and I'd binge watch TV, right? And then I'd go to bed later. And then the next day, I wouldn't feel as good. I wouldn't be as productive. I wouldn't be as patient with my kids. And just has us in this downward spiral. So it's looking at how can we, again, not tackle them all, but how can maybe we take one bad habit and start to work on it so we have more energy and more time perhaps in our days to do more of what we do want to do.
Yeah, and I think we're all guilty of suffering from things in all of those categories. And it does literally, it can take years. But I love how you point out the starting point is just awareness. And that is so key. If you can just start to be aware why you're telling yourself stories and or procrastinating, that can just be the crack in the foundation to a whole new way of being. But ultimately, I don't know if you have any opinions about what do you think is holding us back from beginning to make those changes? And I'm sure there's more than one thing holding us back, right? There's a whole
Yeah,
ball of things.
yeah. I think really what starts even before, you're right, even before identifying the actual obstacles, it's we don't always give ourselves permission, especially as adults and as we get older and we tell ourselves, oh, we have to pay bills and we have to be responsible. And we talk ourselves out of doing the things that may bring us more joy. And so we don't always give ourselves the permission. So I always like to tell people, give yourself permission, let yourself dream, let yourself come up with those goals that are going to excite you. And then the second part, which kind of goes hand in hand, is you have to drop the guilt. That was a big one for me, was then on paper, I had so many things going for me, but I wanted more. I wanted different things. But then the guilt came in and it was like, how can I want more? That's selfish. You should be thankful and grateful for what you have.
Mhm.
And you can be grateful and thankful and still want more. And I like to look at it when we look at a great way of doing this is seeing what example do I want to set for my kids?
Mhm.
Right? What do I want them to see that I'm doing so that they grow up to know that's okay? That's what I'm going to do too, right? So set the
Mhm.
example maybe we didn't have from our parents. We can then set that example for other people in our lives.
Mhm.
And then the third one is, and this isn't my saying, it's in those books and movies where it just, you just need 2 minutes of courage or 20 seconds of courage, that boost of courage to go after it, to have that conversation, to send that email or connection request or whatever that is to start on your journey.
No, I think that's so powerful, especially for parents who I think tend to delay their own dreams and goals because they're parents and maybe try to live through their kids' ambitions or hand off their ambitions to their kids. But it can be so much more powerful to demonstrate what's possible yourself in the midst of parenthood. It is, I don't think that there is any more powerful thing you can do as a parent who wants to encourage their children. So I love that you bring that up because it's so easy. And I'm sure we're all guilty of it at some point, just going, I'm just going to focus on this parent thing. And because it's hard, it's really hard at all stages, but it's so easy to do that. So I think that is such an important point. And you talked about goals, and I would love to hear your thoughts on where do we begin? Let's say we actually start to begin that to think, okay, I'm going to go after this life that is more fulfilling and I have more happiness. But how do we start creating goals to begin to achieve that?
Yeah. So interesting timing. I just had a call with a client last night, and she's one of my longest standing clients. And she said, you know what the biggest game changer for me was? She said, you asked me, you had me close my eyes, and you had me envision an ideal day
Hmm.
in I'll either do 5 or 10 years, depending on the age of the person, but 5 or 10 years, what's your ideal day look like? And work day, if there's work there, from the time you wake up in the morning till the time you go to bed at night, just picture it. Don't make any rules. Don't tell yourself it's silly. Don't tell yourself it's not possible. Just let yourself picture that ideal day. And from there, you can then make the vision a bit more clear, understand, okay, what is it you do want in your life? What don't you want in your life? And drill those down. And that stuck with her and now has her set on a different path from what she was on because that was a vision she created. And it is what gets her through the tough days. So that's what I say to do. Don't get bogged down in the how. Just start with that vision. And if you want, create one sentence of what that looks like. So in my case, I was in corporate, I was working in banking. My whole background was business.
Mhm.
And I came up with one sentence that said that I put for 10 years away.
Mhm.
So in 10 years, I wrote, I am a successful entrepreneur who helps women live happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. At the time, I had no clue what that would look like. I don't have any sociology classes, nothing. My whole background was business.
Mhm.
And parts of me were like, this is silly to put, this is really far-fetched, but I didn't care. I put it out there. And the
Mhm.
second part of it was I wrote it down every day. Maybe not
Mm.
weekends, maybe not 7 days a week, but I wrote it down
Mhm.
probably 5 days a week. I wrote that sentence out. I wrote that sentence in 2019 to come true by 2030. I left the corporate world to do just that 2 years later in 2021. So, not saying it needs to come, not saying it will come that fast for everybody. And it may
Yeah.
not even, it may change, it may go in a different direction. That is also okay.
Mhm.
But it starts with that big, long term, exciting vision
Mhm.
for you to just start to be open to more possibilities.
Yeah, when I talk to people that imagining, especially if you've been in corporate or worked for somebody else your whole life, imagining your ideal day is very difficult and like scary. And so I really love kind of the framework you give, like 10 things in 10 years. And you don't have to accomplish it tomorrow, which oftentimes we beat ourselves up for not doing. But I think and then too, just writing it and committing it and being committed to it and reinforcing that in your brain, I think it's just like such a powerful exercise that I think is really something I love to give people action steps that they can do. You're listening to this, you can do this right now. You can sometime after you listen to this, I would recommend it within 24 hours. There's something powerful about 24 hours to making it a habit and really committing to if you want to change your life in a certain direction, thinking of 10 things, or maybe you can't even think of 10 things, like 5 things, whatever it is.
Yeah. And if I could just add one thing, I love this action step, but
Yeah.
yes, please go do it. If I could
Yeah.
add one thing, some of my 10 items aren't necessarily end goals.
Mhm.
I talk about how I want my kids to be like my kids are
Mhm.
kind and healthy and happy and follow their passion. So some of them aren't necessarily destinations.
Mhm.
They're more how I want us to be living. So
Mhm.
just another thought to throw in there too, that the goals it could be around your work-life balance, it could be around your hobbies, it could be around
Right.
doing more exercise, whatever that looks like for you, it can have a holistic picture.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up because I think it's important to think about how you want to feel and how you want the other people around you to feel and really dial in on that because we're just so used to being stressed all the time. Sometimes I think we don't even think that we can feel differently. It's possible. It's possible.
It is. It
Yeah.
totally is.
Yeah. So I love this idea too, and I find it so interesting. The discussion around unleashing our potential, which I know you focus on too. So I know that I don't know. I've heard statistics that we usually develop very little of our potential. But do you have any insight on how we can work towards becoming more of that potential that we have inside of us and dialing in on what that may be?
Yeah. So I'd say the two biggest things are one are looking at your strengths. What are your strengths and how can you play those up more? And they talk about this a lot in corporate too, right? Or even job interviews, like, oh, what are your weaknesses? And you always
Oh,
want to, you always spin your weaknesses into a positive. A lot of times we focus on our weaknesses probably too much, right? We focus
mhm.
on the gaps.
Mhm.
And especially if we're wearing many hats and trying to do many different things, we'll
Mhm.
focus on what we're not doing or what we're not great at. And I
Mhm.
would say, forget about that stuff. Focus on what you are great at. Write it down. Remind yourself, what are those strengths? What are the parts that you're really good at or you're eager to learn? Maybe you're not there yet, but you're willing to work on it. Can you get help with the other parts, right? Can you outsource them or get help or find a way so that they're not taking up a lot of mental space? And then what was my second thought? Went out the window. It was, sorry, what was your question again?
No, that's okay. It's hard to keep all of that kind of stuff. You've got so much stuff in your mind about all of these topics, but I was curious on how we can start tapping into our potential.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So, biggest things are to rediscover your strengths, write your strengths down. What are they? What are you good at? What can you lean into more? Forget about your weaknesses, put those aside or find people to help you with those, but don't let them take up so much mental space because they
Mhm.
do, and that drains your energy. Focus on what you're good at, lean into that, and then just showcase that as much as you can.
Mhm.
I know we get it's another thing we get. Oh, it's the, oh, I have to sell myself. Ooh, I don't want to look
Yeah, that is
salesy
so
or,
hard.
oh, I don't want to be talking about myself. I don't want to
Mhm.
come across as egotistical. And the thing too is if you're already worrying about that,
Mhm.
you probably will not come across as self-centered or egotistical. You're going to find a way to do it that's more natural, that was going to be right for you. But everything requires us to be selling ourselves in some way.
Mhm.
And just, I would say we have to go out and do that more and don't worry so much about what other people think. That's another, in the book, I talk about three P's that hold us back.
Yes.
And especially as women, the
Yes.
three P's are perfectionism, people pleasing, and perception. So caring too much what other people think of us. And these are all important in small doses because we don't want to be jerks. But these three habits can hold us back so much more than we realize.
Mhm.
And so I'd say, you know what? Done is better than perfect.
Mhm.
For people pleasing, if you're saying yes to somebody else, you're saying a no to yourself.
Mhm.
And then on perception, if you're going to annoy people or if they're going to not treat you well, you don't want them in your circle anyway. So caring less about those three things
Yeah.
will also help you to focus on what's more important in your life.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting. I hadn't seen it before. In your book, you talked about different types of boundaries when you talk about the people pleasing. And so I don't know if you want to talk about that because I thought that was really interesting because it's a buzzword to say create boundaries. And that's
Mhm.
really hard for especially women who've not associated with boundaries at all,
Yeah.
which was me a few years ago. So yeah, can you just talk about like some of the boundaries we need to keep in mind when we're doing that?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll start with probably the hardest one are people boundaries.
Yeah.
So, who do you let into your life on a regular basis? And sometimes we can't control it. Might be a mother-in-law or a boss or a client that we hopefully not a client. Hopefully you love
Yeah.
your clients. There's sometimes people we work with that we
Mhm.
don't love. Uh, so looking at the people in your lives and the simplest way of doing this with all types of boundaries is asking yourself, does this give you energy or does it drain your energy?
Mhm.
If it drains your energy, you need to have a boundary around it.
Mhm.
So if it's, say, your mother-in-law and she drains your energy, okay, so yes, you might have to steer, I don't know, 4 times a year or something like that. Okay. But maybe you put up a boundary to no more than 4 times a year. And maybe after you see her, you go meet up with a friend to give you some more energy to offset the drained energy there. But just, and also too, we're really, especially for any of you people pleasers listening, there are people in your lives that aren't treating you well, that aren't reciprocating their friendship or your generosity. Then who do you not need in your life anymore? And
Right.
it's a really harsh question and it feels icky, but is there who do you need to break up with in your
Mhm.
life? Or who do you need to spend less time with? Because it is really impacting your energy, your joy, your time.
Mhm.
So those would be the big ones on people boundaries.
Mhm.
Time boundaries, we talk about those a lot, but we're not actually bad at setting them, we're bad at sticking to them.
Mhm.
So you might say, okay, I'm going to only work until 5 o'clock and then I'm going to have dinner with my family, or I'm going to go to the gym or whatever that looks like. But if you don't put it in your calendar and if you don't actually make this space and time for it, you're going to come up with a great excuse or a great reason as to why that can't happen. So protecting your time boundaries is really important. And then another one we maybe don't talk about that much are space. So
Mhm.
we have personal space, we have our physical space, but just thinking about, especially in this new world, which I know we've been saying for a while now, if you're working from home and that can be draining some days, right? So what might you need to do when it comes to your working space to bring in more energy or joy? Okay, maybe you can go to a coffee shop or take more breaks to go for walks or things like that. And just again, it comes back to the awareness, being
Mhm.
aware of whether something gives you energy or joy or takes your energy or joy. And then trying to offset that a little bit more, trying to put in those boundaries in place to protect it.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think those are so important to keep in mind and constantly strive to refine as our lives evolve. Like you said, working at home is very tough, and we're always having different relationships and different situations in our lives where we need to check in with ourselves. Is this working for me? How am I feeling? Which I think really leads to I love your emphasis on well-being and helping people in their jobs, and whether they're entrepreneurs or in corporate or whatever they're doing, is to have more well-being. And I think it's just as important and so easy for us to slip into burnout. So I would love to hear your perception on the things that we need to be watching out for when we're headed in that direction.
Yeah. So when it comes, I know burnout, it
Yeah,
sneaks up on us so
it
easily.
does.
And I liken
Yep.
it to if we look at our phones, our cell phones. I'm sure some people are okay with their phone battery dying. I am not. I don't even like my phone getting in the red. It makes me nervous. But I look at ourselves. If we look at ourselves, we're not so great at knowing,
Mhm,
okay, what's my low battery signal and how can I recharge my batteries?
mhm.
And it's interesting. So in my case, I did not know my burnout signs until my mid to late 30s, when I finally connected the dots. And my burnout signs started when I was in grade 6.
Wow.
I put a lot of pressure on myself. Yeah, 12. I know I look at it now, I'm like, wow, how did I
Wow.
get burnt out at age 12? And
Yeah.
my parents were not good at managing stress or looking after
Mhm,
their well being.
mhm,
So they wouldn't really have known or picked up on it either.
mhm.
But starting in grade 6, and then a few times later on when I got really stressed and burnt out, my neck would actually get stuck and be
Yeah.
stuck for a few days.
Mhm,
And since I connected the dots, now, not to say the stress goes away, right? We're always going to
right.
have stress. But now I have the awareness that as soon
Mhm,
as my neck starts tightening or starting to hurt, that is my sign. It's
mhm,
Shannon, okay, time to go for a walk or take a break or look after yourself. And so it's getting to know what are your signs. So when you
mhm,
have your really busy periods, when you have your stressful periods, what Have you noticed any patterns? What might be showing up, right? Sometimes hear a lot of people get eye twitches, or you get really bad colds certain times of the year. It can be fatigue, it can be insomnia. Like they show up in all different ways physically. And we just have to get better at recognizing our signs and then making sure we're doing the stuff we know we should be doing to improve our well-being, right? The eating well, the sleeping well, the moving our bodies. It doesn't have to be rigorous. We don't have to go do a crazy workout or anything. Even just walking more is great. And then looking after our mental and emotional health and well-being as well, right? So, the relationships we have in our lives, relationships are the number one success factor in happiness. And that's not romantic relationships. It's any type of strong, healthy relationships in our lives. So nurturing those relationships is really good for us. And then mental being, meditating or journaling or practicing gratitude, anything there that will just help us with our mindfulness.
Yeah, no, I was actually probably in my 40s before I even learned my burnout signs. Yeah, and it would be helpful if we did have that little like battery symbol
I
we could
know.
see, but other people could see, and they'd be like, "Hey."
Apple's gonna have to come up with something.
I
That's
know,
another thing I
right?
want
Forget the
Apple to invent
goggles.
is letting me know how much water I've had and how much more I need. I'm like, that'd be another really good invention to have because water is also really important to us as well.
Right? Yes, that would be so helpful. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I would love to also hear too about your thoughts about what questions we should be asking ourselves, because I don't know if you want to briefly tell like the story that brought you to write the book,
Mm,
but it's feel for people. I don't want them to have that pain point that you had, or maybe I had, to make them see their lives completely different and go, no, I want to be happier and have more joy. So, what questions can we be asking ourselves to
sure.
create better lives?
Sure. So I'll share my story first and then I'll answer your
Yeah.
question. So, yeah, it was 5 years ago now that my oldest, who was 5 at the time, was admitted to hospital and ended up spending 31 days there. He was there for Christmas that year for his perforated appendix, which is a really simple, not simple, but for his appendix, which should be a simple procedure, but just everything that could have gone wrong went wrong for
Right.
him, unfortunately. And that was the first time in my life. We had a 3-year-old at home, but my husband and I took turns staying overnight in the hospital. And my son would go to bed early. He was sleeping a lot. And it was the first time in my life where my career really took a back seat. And I had time, and I wasn't going to be watching TV and stuff while he was sleeping. So I had time to sit there and really contemplate on my life. And I don't know where it came from, but all of a sudden, 3 questions popped into my head. And I asked myself, am I happy? Am I healthy? And do I feel fulfilled? And my answers were not really. And then I felt horrible and the guilt. We were talking about earlier, the
Yeah.
guilt set in on Shannon. How can you not feel happy, healthy, and fulfilled when you have so much great things going on in your life? And I think what happens sometimes is we have dreams or we have an idea when we're younger of what our life looks like, and then reality sets in, or we become parents, or we get married, or we buy a house or rent an apartment, whatever those look like. And with each thing, we let go of, okay, maybe that dream can't happen, or maybe that's no longer feasible, whatever that is. And I think for me, that was what had happened is I was doing well in my career and I was good at it and all this stuff, but it wasn't what lit me up. And as a result of that, I think because of that, I really didn't feel the happiness and fulfillment that I wanted. And also, I was so stressed out at work all the time that my coping mechanisms were very unhealthy. And I wasn't doing the things that would have helped fix that. I wasn't looking after myself. And so I think everything's so intertwined, right? And for me, it was I wasn't happy in my career, but it could be maybe you're not happy in your relationship or you're not happy in your where you live or there's so many things that could be making that happen, but then it spills into all the other areas. And so it was that moment too where I was like, nope, you know what? I'm going to go for it and I'm going to start my journey and I want to get a big heck yes to all three of my questions. And now I can confidently say I have a big heck yes to all three of my questions.
I love that. And it's got to be so fulfilling to help people realize that for themselves. And so I think that's an amazing story. And it's a beautiful testament to all that you went through that you made this change, right? It's so many, we have so many opportunities to make a change that I think sometimes we go, maybe next time, maybe next year, or whatever. But yeah, it's just the power of where you are now and just a few years after that moment when you started just making a list of ten goals in 10 years and everything has changed for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, and it starts with baby steps too,
Yeah,
right? So
right.
it's interesting to look back and it's, oh, how did I get here? Like I'm now a
Right.
speaker, I'm now a coach, I wrote a book and it's but really at the time it was just it's taking those small manageable steps,
Yeah.
right? It's breaking things down so they
Mhm.
don't seem overwhelming and so that you can actually go do it and then feel like okay, you're starting to make progress.
Mhm.
And that's really what it's been for me. It's
Mhm.
just trial and error, making those small steps, putting myself out there and
Mhm.
helping my clients to do the same, right? With their goals or whatever they want to do in their lives. It's helping them break it down so it is manageable and so it doesn't seem so daunting.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up too. It's like helping people break it down and also realizing that if you're at that point where you want to make that change, absolutely reaching out and asking for help is one, not a weakness, but two, will help you get there so much quicker.
As a coach, I have a therapist. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Right, right.
amount
Coaches
of
have
growth
coaches.
I have had through my therapy and my coaches, it's
Mhm.
mind blowing.
Yeah, yeah. And so I like to shine a light on that when somebody's okay, I'm going to do it. And it's so much easier when you ask for help and you have somebody who's been through that journey to help you to get there
Yeah. Even
and
for
not
my
make
book,
all
I
the
hired a
mistakes along the
coach.
way.
Yeah, I hired a book coach for my book because it was I had people offering to edit my book and stuff like that, but I'm like, actually, I also need somebody to hold me accountable and to
Right.
push me and lift me up on the hard days. And
Hmm.
yeah, that's what coaches can do, which is pretty great.
Yeah, it is. It's really can be life-changing. So, if you wanted to leave listeners with a takeaway or a few takeaways from this episode, what would that be?
Say just whatever you're thinking of, whatever sparked for you during this conversation, go let yourself dream about it. Write it out as a sentence. Picture it 5 to 10 years from now. Build off of that, build out those 5 or 10 sentences, but go do it. As you said, within 24 hours, go do it now
Mhm.
before it slips out of your brain. And just know that you can. And it's can be so freeing to break free and live your desired life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally possible. Thank you, Shannon. It's been wonderful talking to you and talking about your book, Breaking Free. And where can listeners connect with you and get the book and learn more?
Sure. So you can go to my website, which is shannontalbot.com. My book is available on Amazon, or you can go to the link on my website. And I'm on LinkedIn and on Instagram, Shannon Talbot underscore coaching on Instagram. So I'd love to have you connect and hear your stories and hear your dreams. So please share them with me so I can help cheer you on.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we have such an amazing community that definitely acts as that cheerleader for our listeners. So, thank you so much for giving us permission to break free from all the things that are holding us back and talking about your new book.
Thanks so much, Angela, for having me.
Yeah, thanks.